Well, my name's Joshua Jones. I am a trainer and consultant for Zoom. I've been doing this stuff for about 10 years, and I can nerd about it all day, but I've got a couple guests that are gonna come up with me. And so to get things started, just wanted to express that I'm really happy that Zoom is doing this. What we're doing at Zoom is pretty awesome because it used to be really difficult to take our events that we are used to doing in person, wherever we might be, and transfer that online. And Zoom's making that a lot easier for us. And to help us discuss that, I'm going to bring up a couple of guests. Grab my note card so I remember the titles. In a little bit, we're gonna hear from Ken Yoshioka, and he is the mobile media and training specialist. Promotion? Okay. You're gonna have to remind me what that is, because I didn't write that down, Ken. He's at the University of San Francisco. But first, we're going to bring up e-learning and operations manager for FranklinCovey, Amber Rackham. Can you come on up, Amber? So we're gonna have a bit of an interview, then some discussion and Q&A, and stick around later.
Great, thanks.
We're gonna talk about gear and get really nerdy, but come after. I've got some toys that you can poke around with and ask questions about. But let's talk about the planning and execution of online events first. Amber, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Are we good? Yeah? Okay, cool. So Amber and I have worked together quite a lot on events for FranklinCovey, and you have some really cool events.
Thank
so
you.
I'm really glad that you guys were willing to come out. So first off, just tell us a little bit about what you do for FranklinCovey, and if you can, a little bit about your online events program.
Sure. So I am the e-learning and seminar operations manager at FranklinCovey. I support both public programs and also our corporate marketing department. About a year ago, public programs and corporate marketing merged together, and due to our extensive experience and involvement with virtual events, we inherited the corporate marketing virtual events as well. We currently host about 15 to 20 content webcasts. It's a reoccurring series. We also do a monthly event, which is it's an exclusive membership. And as being a member or purchasing our All Access Pass, you get access to our All Access Pass event, which again is a monthly event. We have some pretty cool speakers, presenters that come, and generally we try to target speakers who complement our content. And so with that being said, we also run just like promotions around new books or content, and we generally utilize webcasts for those as well. With these new opportunities, it just created the need for our Zoom relationship, and as Joshua said, now we're working together to run really large virtual meetings, webinars, and events.
Awesome. And yeah, you do get some pretty cool people to come in and speak for you.
Thanks.
You guys have all heard of FranklinCovey before? It's probably not super hard for you guys to get speakers. But about that, so about the All Access Pass event, so customers of yours that have this program can attend all the events that they'd like to, which is really cool. And you do bring some really amazing names, some guest speakers, and I'm not gonna name drop them, but you can. What concerns do you run into with them? What kind of approach do you have for planning, helping them to prep?
Sure. So with our All Access Pass events, as Joshua stated, we have some pretty big headliner speakers. Last month we featured Jillian Michaels. And some of the challenges that we run into are really just kind of availability. It's difficult to get somebody that has a very busy schedule to hop on and do basically like a Zoom download, or hey, let me train you on Zoom. Take 30, 45 minutes out of your schedule and let me help train you on how to use Zoom. So it's nice that Zoom is so easy to use, because literally there's sometimes when we're like 10 minutes to go live and our speaker has launched the Zoom feed and they're in there and we're running down the basics, like mute, unmute, share camera, show video, those types of things. So like I said, availability and schedules, it's difficult, but because Zoom is so easy to use, we literally can pop somebody in front of a computer 10 minutes before go live and run a seamless virtual meeting.
I totally agree. I didn't even ask her to say that. It's true though. It is really accessible for most people. I don't find that most people have any trouble with the interface. Aside from scheduling and getting the time, have you met any particular challenges with any of your guest speakers so far?
We haven't run into any major challenges. We have some speakers that like to run their own presentations, which we of course encourage. It's difficult to time the slides or to advance a presentation when it's not your own presentation. So I highly encourage, if you do have presenters or speakers who are eager to run their own presentation, that you encourage them to do so. I think from an equipment standpoint, pretty much everybody's just utilized a headset. We had one speaker who just utilized her iPhone earbuds. So literally, really easy. It's kind of mind-blowing that you can engage in this type of communication and that you can, really have that live feed and everybody's seeing what you're seeing, and it's pretty cool.
Awesome. We're going to talk about some different technical setups for, that guest speaker. One of your guest speakers that had the full studio and green screen all set up already. That was pretty impressive. Recently, you started a new program a couple weeks ago called based around a book called the Get Better series. You asked me to help a little bit with setting up the gear. Can you tell us more about that program? How is it different? Were there any changes to your approach?
Absolutely. So with the All Access Pass events, we generally, as I've stated, we just have one speaker that we focus on. With this new series, it's an 8-week series, and we're getting ready to launch a new book in November. And so each week with this Get Better series, we showcase and have an interview, kind of like talk show studio setup. So we've transformed one of our offices in our corporate marketing department into kind of a green room, if you will. And we've added a couple of nice chairs. We did 2 cameras. They're stationary cameras that we've just basically fixed on top of tripods. And then we've also purchased 2 lavalier microphones to mic up our host and our interviewer and our interviewee. And then we also purchased a mixer so that we could, yes, we purchased a mixer. However, we made the mistake of purchasing not a great mixer. I think that's something that we're learning as we're going. You don't have to blow the budget, but it is important to understand exactly what your needs are so that you're sure that you do purchase the right equipment to help support your meeting. Joshua was phenomenal in helping us to identify equipment. He went above and beyond as far as creating a nice list with his recommendations.
It was a good list.
It was a really good list, a really good list. Gave us a couple of recommendations. Here's kind of the high end, here's kind of the low end, here's the middle, some names that he was comfortable recommending, some gear that he's worked with in the past. And then he also included links where we could purchase it or where we could research it. And so we just kind of went offline and did a little Best Buy, Amazon day and got all of our gear together. Within the studio, as I mentioned, it's set up just like a kind of a talk show. But we did have to bring in some lighting because we wanted to be sure that it wasn't dark or that it didn't take away from the actual experience. Mm-hmm. So something to consider as well. Your space, you may need to bring in some lighting to kind of help, depending upon what you're looking for there. All Access Pass, Get Better. I think those are the 2 major Zoom projects that we've been working on together.
And so in that interview space, you said a couple cameras. Would you mind telling our audience what kind of cameras you got?
I don't know. I
they're
think
Logitech
they're Logitech.
C920s.
Yes, thank you, Logitech.
So the last group that was in here was from Logitech, and they were talking all about the quality of the gear. And you can get by using a simple, small webcam device. I've got a C920 over there. And yeah, you can set it up on a tripod. And you do have to be careful about the distance and the lighting because that will change how the camera is responding in the space. So asked you to give us a few takeaways, and the first one, kind of we've hit on already, is planning and preparing. I'll read it to you so you don't have to turn around. Scoping the event and the equipment needs. What did you learn? Especially with the Get Better, you said, maybe we didn't get the best mixer the first time.
Right, yeah. So definitely be prepared for things to go wrong. It's just gonna happen. And with that being said, it's always a good idea just to have like a quick meeting with your team. Talk about, who is our audience? What is the intent of this meeting? What is it just a broadcast? Is it gonna be interactive? So then that way everybody's kind of on the same page and you've got the same go-to strategy. And then I'm a checklist girl. I like to write things down and check them off. So just kind of start going through, the day of, run a show and start at a high level. Do you want to meet 30 minutes beforehand? Do you need to have special setup for some of your attendees? Do they need to be panelists or do they need to be a host? So just make sure that you're taking care of everything on the back end. So plan and prepare because things will go wrong, but if you are prepared, you'll be able to minimize the impact of those things going wrong.
And how many test sessions did we do in that interview space?
In the Get Better?
Yeah.
So let's see, I want to say we did 3.
At least
3.
That I was there for.
Yeah, we did 3 kind of setups, like, hey, get everybody in the room, let's test the audio, let's make sure that all of the equipment is synced and running properly. So we just set up a mock, just a pretend Zoom webinar, and we just basically did hey, let's try and see how it works before we go live. And then even 30 minutes before our actual events, we have the whole crew gather and we have everybody log in and we do another round of technical test and powdering the nose or whatever it may be. So definitely plan and prepare. Know your meeting.
Absolutely. I like the idea of a checklist, just kind of giving yourself a rundown, who's doing what, who's showing their screen, who's going to be a host or co-host in the event, and we can talk more about that stuff. The next thing you mentioned is schedule a practice run and technical rehearsal, which we kind of already hit on. Yeah. What did you see come out of that process?
So when we do our technical runs, it's very enlightening for me personally, because I get the opportunity to really, I don't want to say get under the hood. That's kind of a weird statement, but in a way, you are really being sure that audio is correct, that your internet connection. I mean, things as far as running around and trying to find an ether cord 5 minutes before you're going live, that's not fun because you're on Wi-Fi. So realistically, I know I'm kind of repeating a couple of things, but really the time and the energy that you put into the technical test and the preparation just ensures that you have a very seamless webinar.
I'd call that reinforcing.
Reinforcing, there we go. That's what, yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times I've worked with a client and we're about to go live and they're like, hey, we've got this new something or other, set it up, they're relying on it. Uh-oh, I guess we should have tested that ahead of time. So definitely take the time, do it repeatedly, do it until it's just rote, it's muscle memory is the best advice I could give. The next item you mentioned, reflect and review. So what went well? What could you put some improvement into?
Yeah.
What do you learn around this?
I personally like to reflect after the session because it gives me some insight or maybe some key takeaways that I can use to make my next session or my next webinar even better. We like to kind of have like a little download where we just share praise, offer encouragement and congratulations, but we also just kind of shoot real with each other and we say, hey, I could have done better here, or I could have done better here, or like Joshua said, we had an issue with our mixer. Our first series 2 weeks ago, our audio was distorted, and so it was about 15 minutes into our presentation, and our interviewee sounded like a robot. And it went on for 45 minutes, and we couldn't identify what the issue was. It wasn't a problem coming through our speaker or our headset that we were listening to, where the audio was being distorted, but it was coming through distorted in the presentation. And so after that, obviously, we had our little download. We spoke with Joshua. He gave us a couple of suggestions. He did some investigation on his end as well to make sure that things looked good and it wasn't something that we had missed. So after we identified that it was probably the mixer, there were a couple of things that we could have done, but because of time and because the event is so crucial to us, we actually ended up going out and buying a new mixer just to avoid that problem altogether. And happy to report that our second session went very well, and we didn't have a robot. We didn't have audio issues or distortion.
Yeah.
So
that was a fun one because, new piece of equipment. In all the testing that we had done, this issue hadn't presented. Then all of a sudden, 10, 15 minutes into the session, we've got this crackling sound that's going on with everything they say. And then it'll go away for a minute, then it comes back. And then me being smart in afterthought, I was like, okay, let's look up what's going on with this device. And it's all over the place. Everybody's complaining about it. Everybody has the issue with this particular device. So if you're going to implement new hardware, before you purchase, maybe scan some forums. Look through, what's going on with this item? Do people have common issues with it? That one happened to be a power setting within a Windows machine, where you go in and you uncheck some super random thing that you would never troubleshoot to get to. Luckily, there's YouTube, and people talk about this stuff all the time. So Amber, thank you so much. Plan and prepare, and take the time to schedule that practice run, rehearse, reflect and review. Not about just what went right, but focus on what went wrong and what can be improved. But definitely take the time to congratulate each other.
Absolutely.
And say, this wasn't easy, good job. Because I know a lot of us probably feel a lot of stress from above with these events. You've got a lot of oversight. Something goes wrong, you're going to hear about it, and it may not be your favorite conversation for the week. So with that, Amber, thank you so much. Yeah. And we're going to bring up Ken. Great. And Ken is, again, at... Thank you. You want to take your water? Thanks, Amber. This is the first time I've ever done this in front of people, by the way. There's no webcam between us. It's really, really strange for me. So Ken, again, University of San Francisco, and tell us what your new title is.
So it's the Senior Instructional Technologist.
Oh, everybody okay?
Okay. So I'm the Senior Instructional Technologist at the University of San Francisco. We like to use the acronym, so I'm a Senior Instructional Technologist in ITT, part of ETS, part of ITS. You got all that. So what we do, we're a team of 4, including my director. And what we do is we handle all the training and development for the
There's
university.
only 4 of you?
Only 4 of us.
You didn't tell me that before.
Yeah. 1 for the Learning Management System, Canvas, 1 for graphics and media and web work, and I do the rest. Enterprise, multimedia, web conferencing, lecture capture, digital storytelling, you name it, we do it. Also productivity, we do that too. We handle the documentation, we're starting to create a video library of our major products that we use on campus, and having a kind of a video training series, kind of like lynda.com. So that's been working out very well for us. But we've been really delving into web conferencing because a lot of the classrooms are starting to do hybrid classrooms and also synchronous classrooms. One, they have students, we have several regional campuses. And so there may be a cohort, part of it's on the main campus in San Francisco, some of them are in San Jose, some of them are in Pleasanton. How do we connect them all together? And so we've been using Zoom to connect those classrooms. One example is an instructor taught this class, and she would go to each campus in turn so that everyone would have a chance to have the live class, and everybody else would be Zooming in.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so it's something like that.
That's a good idea.
We also do, it's not just the classrooms, but we also do staff training. So a lot of staff have been coming up to me about, hey, we're running an alumni event for a department, and we have panelists who are not here. We need to Zoom them in and have it be interactive. So again, very, very challenging. But see, those are some of the things that we deal with.
Yeah, and in talking to you, what's getting me really riled up and interested in this is you don't have a one-size-fits-all model. Every use case is at least unique in some way, shape, or form. How do you deal with that without going crazy? Or do you?
Sometimes it's some very, very long days.
It's a thin line.
But what we do, somebody will come up to me and say, either an instructor or a staff member, and say, I have an event coming up. I have a classroom, and we're linking to our sister classroom in the Netherlands. And I need to hook them up via Zoom. How can we do that? And so what we do is we set up a consultation. I get them through all the particulars. Okay, who's going to be online? Who's going to be face-to-face? Where are the speakers going to be? What kind of interaction is there going to be? Is there just going to be chat from the questions from the remote audience? Are you going to allow them to speak their questions? All those things are so key because it becomes critical in terms of setting up the room, right? And each room on campus is a little bit different. We don't have the budget to build Zoom rooms for every classroom, so we kind of do it on the fly. So another part of my job is I research out and purchase different pieces of equipment that we test out and try out with our faculty and staff. We try to make it reasonable, so in case a department feels like, you know what, we can do that ourselves. And that's really our main objective, is to train so they can take it on themselves and set up the session and do it themselves. You know, that's the optimal thing. So we try to find equipment that they can afford. Mm-hmm. You know, we also, you know, if they want to spend a little more, great. We look for some of those solutions also, but we try to keep it budget conscious.
So on the technology side with Zoom, do you find that most people adapt to it pretty easily?
They do. It's the logistics that really just can wreck a session.
More about that. What do you mean, logistics?
In terms of, you know, setting up microphones and say, okay, we'll just turn the laptop around.
Oh.
And use that microphone. And people complain online, I can't hear the question.
It's because they walked over there.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So making sure that we consult with them first, go to the room and see what it's like. What's the layout going to be like? How are people going to be arranged? Is it going to be tables like this? Mm-hmm. Is it just like stadium seating, like in a classroom? All those things matter in terms of the setup. What kind of equipment we're going to use, what kind of video cameras we're going to use, and how we're going to have the hosts of the meeting kind of set a protocol.
So then even your presenters and your hosts, their personality type, whether they like to move around back and forth on the stage or whether they stay at a lectern the whole time, right. It all comes into play.
Exactly.
You talked about your synchronous and what I call blended events. I think you called them hybrid events, similar term. Those are always fun. Anybody done any of those? Live in person and you're doing it online, and that can be challenging. So again, what's the experience like there? What steps do you take to make sure that that in-person experience is similar, if not exactly the same as that online experience?
Okay. I can kind of tell that story with an example. We had an instructor who had, she was teaching a nursing class, an upper division nursing class, and a number of students can't make it to the class. So we had to decide how we're going to set up the room for Zoom so that everybody feels like they're there. They feel like they're engaged. They feel like they're part of the classroom, especially the online audience. So we went to the room. Okay, we asked her, how many students are going to be in the room? Now, I don't deal with large amounts of the audience like what Amber does, but I can tell you some of those faculty and staff, when they have to deal with some of the logistics, it feels like a freaking large meeting. I mean, it's really stressful for them. So my job is to help them to reach that comfort level. So for this one faculty, we went to the room, we brought some equipment, we tried it out, and then we asked her, okay, how many students are going to be online? Okay, this many students. How many are going to be in the classroom? Okay, so if the students need to hear questions and interaction from the audience, we can't have them sit in that far corner. We can't have people straggle around the room. You gather them together and make it a smaller group. Then we used some boundary microphones. We just kind of rayed them out, tested them out in the room. We had someone zoom in from outside the classroom, and we did a sound test from every part of the classroom. We set up a webcam and we had her decide, okay, what do you want the students to see online? You, the presenter, the teacher, or the classroom? So we made her decide how she wanted that online experience to be. And we worked with her to set up that experience.
And you do that with every single one?
Every single one. I think it's essential. There's no cookie cutter. We had one instructor did the same thing. It was that synchronous class with her, with another classroom in the Netherlands. She wanted to use this extremely expensive Polycom phone as a microphone. Great microphone. So we tried it in the room. It's a very wide room, just like this. We set it up in the middle. We did a test, and it worked out okay. Day of the class, 30, 40 students in the room. The online audience could not hear a thing because
Paper
people,
shuffling, all kinds of things.
People absorb sound.
Oh, no kidding.
People absorb sound, and that was one of the things I learned from that. You know, Amber, you're talking about lessons learned. We ran into a lot of those situations. Oh my gosh, how come that didn't work? Okay, because we did the test in an empty room. And then when we came to the live room, sure enough, sound was reduced because people absorb sound.
No kidding.
So
That's
we had
really
to
interesting.
think differently. It allowed it.
It's
forced
obvious,
us.
but come on.
Yeah.
Like, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't have thought of that either. Interesting. You did bring up a technical term. You talked about a boundary microphone. If you guys aren't familiar with a boundary microphone, essentially they have a long cast. They can hear things from a good distance, whereas this microphone is very directional. It's listening for sound right here. If you start talking, we're not going to hear it through the microphone, maybe just slightly. Oh look, I accidentally moved to the next slide. So the first thought that you were sharing with me that you'd like to share with others is think before you leap. So this kind of brings us back to the planning thing. What made you come up with this one? What happened, Ken?
Well, we did something on I think it was that classroom that we set up for the Netherlands. We thought, oh, okay, this is going to work. It was great in the test, but we didn't really think that through. You know, how many students were going to be in that class? We just kind of did it. But what it forced me to realize was I really need to sit down and consult with, the client to make sure that, how many people are actually going to be there. There's actually going to be an event coming up later this week. They're going to borrow some of our microphones and webcams. I made it very specific. How many people are going to be in the room? Which room are you going to be in? So we can plan accordingly. It's so key to ask the extra question. It's so easy to just say, oh, okay, yeah, that'll work. But I think you had mentioned too, just doing the planning, right?
Absolutely.
Making sure that things are going to run right.
Awesome.
One of the things we realized, and this is, I don't know how many of you have a room with built-in AV. We have one of our main conference centers. It has built-in AV with a mixer, but it has something called a press feed. You ever heard of that? A media feed. All the analog microphones like these feed into the mixer, and there's one out. And so on a computer, you can only choose one microphone. We bought a device. It's a digital breakout box. Focusrite, Alesis, they all make one. XLR in from that single media feed. You get all the microphones. USB out to your computer. Many microphones, one input. So if you have a room like that, we just found it by accident. It was something valuable we learned about for specific rooms that can work that way. Oh, it was so much. There are a lot of main events that run in that room. Mm-hmm. It made it so much easier.
So now that's everybody's favorite room because it works so well?
Yeah. Yes.
The next bit you shared was just the fact that managing live and remote attendees is kind of an art form. Why do you say that?
Well, a lot of faculty and staff, they don't realize that there's an online audience, and you really need to bring them in so they feel like they're sitting in those seats. Especially faculty that are used to just teaching to one audience, either all online or all in person. We had one instructor, great instructor, but just didn't know how to keep those online students involved. Mm-hmm. Whether it's going to be, having breaks during the lecture to say, do we have any questions? And to be mindful of, okay, let's check with our online audience. Let's see what kind of questions people have. And the host will check. Okay, oh yeah, someone's raised their hand in Zoom. You could raise your hand. Okay, let's hear from so-and-so. and provide that protocol.
And so can those remote attendees jump in and be on webcam and speak their questions in some cases or all cases?
Not always. For public events, I have them decide, again, it's that planning. I have them decide what do they want that protocol to be in that session. Do they want to deal with voice interaction during the session? Sometimes that can be just a nightmare. Two people will start speaking, oh, no, you go ahead. No, you go ahead. No, you go ahead, it's okay.
Can you hear me now?
And it's, it's terrible. So deciding, are all questions from the online audience are going to be chatted? Or is it going to be vocal? They need to decide that, and then to create a protocol. So there's some decorum in the session. Some of those best practices, when you're not speaking, you mute your microphone. If you're the host, you kind of be mindful and look at that participant list and say, okay, I think some of these people need to be silenced for a while. And you mute them all, right? So I told those clients, the faculty and the staff are going to be hosts. You're the boss. You set the ground rules. Set them.
This kind of gives me a side question that we didn't really prep, but not that this is all prep, by the way. Somewhat. What about those hosts, that instructor? If they have a really large online audience, do they have somebody else that's assisting them in managing the session, or is it all on the instructor?
Good question.
Does it depend?
Yeah, good question. Some instructors are very good at being host and lecturer. We have one instructor, he bought all his own equipment. He gets in there half an hour early and sets up his room. He's got a great setup. Most instructors are not going to be like that. One instructor had a staff member there for a 4-hour class, sitting there as the host, managing the online session. So they were fortunate that staff member was very agreeable.
Couldn't find a teacher's assistant, or?
That's what we're getting to. That's what we're asking those faculty now.
Yeah.
If they're teaching and they have the budget in their department, to get a TA to be the host on those online sessions.
Makes sense to me.
The synchronous session to the Netherlands, she had 2 great TAs. They kind of tag team for each session, and then we're able to manage the session to make sure that the audio is working okay. You mute things when they need to be muted, check the participant list, all of that. So that was invaluable. That way the instructor or the speaker can just speak, present, teach.
Okay, and your third point, equipment doesn't need to break the bank. I think we've kind of talked about this. In fact, Amber used the term break the bank already, so this is something that we can think about. At Zoom, we like to use the term device agnostic. Plug it in, go for it. If your computer can find the device, you can use it with Zoom. Is there anything that you would add around that?
Yeah, some devices don't work very well.
Just in general?
Yeah, some don't. We have, and it really depends on the situation. I use a Samsung Go mic. Has an Omni setting, and in a small room, say if this is a small graduate seminar, and you're going to be in a conference room, like some of the conference rooms here, then something like that is perfect. Small, it's portable, has huge pickup, a very hot microphone, and so it's all you need. Larger classroom, you can't do that. You can't depend on a microphone reaching to that back corner and depending on it to pick up. You just can't. It's just physically impossible.
Unless you want to hear every pencil that falls onto the floor.
Exactly.
Awesome. So key takeaways from Ken, think before you leap. Oh, I moved my card too quick. Managing live and remote attendees is kind of an art form, and I totally agree with that. Equipment doesn't need to break the bank. Let's get into our discussion. And here we're going to ask you guys to jump in. If you have questions, I think we have a couple handhelds. Just a sec. We're going to have some discussion points, but I'm coming to you first. Thank you. So first thing I wanted to ask you about to kind of get the conversation rolling, what's going on now? I know FranklinCovey is currently running an event. How do you feel? Is it like leaving your child?
Right now. I was literally sending an email before I was walking in just to make sure everybody was good to go. Of course, everything's good to go, but it is a little nerve-wracking when both Joshua and I are here, and we have an event going on in Salt Lake. But again, Zoom is wonderful. There's lots of great producers that help us and support us, and we've been utilizing the Zoom platform for almost about 7 months now. So It's been great. We really like it. We really like it. And we've actually even adopted it, and we're utilizing it for our internal meetings as well.
Yes.
So yeah, just moving on up.
That's cool.
It's
it
cool.
just kind of snowballs a little bit, right?
Yeah, it does. And then everybody comes to me now because they think I'm the Zoom expert.
Yeah.
So.
How are you doing that? How do you do that?
Yeah.
That's cool. Ken, what's new over at USF? What's going on?
I think it's that blended learning. You know, it's not something that was readily available because the platforms that we used before just weren't robust enough.
And again, by blended, we mean you've got that live in-person audience,
Yes.
you've got the remote participants, maybe
Exactly.
multiple classrooms. Okay.
Yeah, the hybrid classroom, you know, sometimes they're giving an option. You can attend in person or you can watch online. So, and it counts as attendance.
Oh, even if they're on campus, they can
Yes.
choose to
Yeah,
watch online.
They're starting to do that.
Is that causing those classrooms to get smaller and smaller?
It does. It does. And
Is that
that's
a good
where
thing?
It's good and bad.
Yeah.
Now, if they can't make it, you know, fine. But I think you know some instructors are experimenting with it to see how well it works. Is it going to still maintain seats in the classroom and still have a good, healthy, you know, mix of
Sure.
online and in person? But it's challenging. It's like what we were talking about before. You know, every room's going to be different. We really have to train those faculty to be aware of the environment, to plan accordingly, to get to us early. You know, like you were talking about, having something set up, and you know, all of a sudden, 10 minutes before, you got to go on air. Same thing here. You know, they can't just say, "Oh, in a couple of days, I'm running a class and I'm connecting to a sister class in Mexico. Can you help us out with that?" That's a tough timeline. You know, it's really tough, and I might not be free
That's an understatement.
to set that up.
Absolutely.
Yes, and so you know, yeah, those are the challenges. But it's a great challenge because Zoom has been so easy to use. Writing the documentation, we write one for faculty and staff, one for students, one for hosts, and one for users. Right. So it's been
Very
great.
thorough.
Yeah.
And that totally leads me into the next question I was going to bring up. So those were some challenges. Sounds like Zoom is helping. Amber, what kind of challenges were you guys running into? And has Zoom been helpful with them?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest challenges that we ran into was being capped from an attendee perspective. Some of the past platforms, web conferencing or virtual meetings, you can only have about 500, maybe even 1,000 attendees. Zoom was the perfect answer for us. And so we have a large room right now that allows 3,000 attendees. So that just took that challenge right away for us, and is one of the reasons that we actually chose to go with Zoom. So.
There's so many good reasons. Okay, so we've talked about those key learning objectives. Ken, any other challenges that you want to bring up? Any specific instance that made you scratch your head a little?
I think it's just the people thinking that their free account is going to be the same as their pro account.
Oh.
So many, and I think that on our part, this is where we need to really do much more promotion. You know, we just kind of assume, okay, people are just going to log into our USF Zoom site, they'll get their pro account. But no, we have several emails saying, hey, I only have limited time and I can only have this many people on my meeting. I thought I had a pro account. They need to, well, we also have single sign-in on our Zoom accounts. So they just sign into usfca.zoom.us. It automatically activates their account, download the software, their license is set. And
But
so,
it defaults to a basic account when they set up?
No, but
Okay.
usually they go to the Zoom site.
Oh, and just
sign
create
in.
their own account by
Yes,
themselves.
yes.
Manage domain.
Yeah, so it's a lot of it is getting the word out because faculty, staff, and students get a Zoom account. We've been challenging them, especially the graduate programs, that a lot of them can't meet together face-to-face, to really leverage technology to meet together, right? Don't meet because you feel like I can't get on campus. Yes, you can. You can meet virtually in Zoom, and everybody gets a pro account. So
Awesome.
yeah.
You guys mind taking some questions? They look really scary. Can we have this gal in the red sweater first? And tell us your name and where you're from, please.
I'm Senya. I run an executive coaching company, and we're thinking of doing some large scale. Some of our coaches are experts in certain fields. So my question to both of you is on audience interaction and your best practices that you've seen in audience interaction. I'd love to know what's the maximum number of people that have come, and where do you see that best audience interaction? Is it the person who's the guest on the show saying, oh, we have people from Europe at the beginning? I mean, that seems a little bit boring. What have you seen that's good? Near the beginning, maybe in the middle, at the end? Have you done polls? What's exciting? What makes it exciting from an audience interaction point of view? Thanks.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead first. We generally utilize the Q&A pod. Is that Q&A pod?
You can call it whatever you want.
Yeah, it's a Q&A. And generally, we encourage participants while the interview is happening to go ahead and answer any questions that they would like us to share or bring up with the interviewer. I haven't utilized the polls within Zoom yet. It sounds like I may potentially have an opportunity to do that with one of our upcoming speakers. But I know from past webinars that we've run that we generally do get quite a bit of interaction when we do integrate polls. And I would say just kind of throughout the presentation. Generally, you could start, I guess, and maybe have a poll in the beginning of your lobby. You know, what brought you here today? 3 or 4 different options to choose from. I think that just continually reminding participants to utilize those tools, because they'll just get so in tune and just really focused on the presentation or the topic. And so our interviewee will just stop and just say, hey, I'd just like to remind you, you can chat, you can put Q&A in the pod. So those would be kind of my suggestions. I hope that's helpful.
I think, you know, having a moderator, you know, who can, you know, again, we're talking about all of our sessions are interactive. Everything is interactive. It's deciding how it's going to be interactive. For a large session, you know, thousands or hundreds of people, you know, having a spoken word, that's impossible. But having the host or the presenter having to deal with that, so we usually have 2 computers. We have the host who's hosting the session, the speaker joins the session, all they have to do is present. We have that host kind of culling through all the questions, answering, you know, questions about, oh, okay, I can't get audio, things like that, but also to kind of manage the questions and get those out to the presenter. Our sessions are usually smaller. Our HR department is starting to you know, permit people to attend their HR training sessions online. So again, it's that challenging portion of planning it out so that those people online can feel like they're part of the session, right? That they have a say, questions. That it's like, oh, okay, I'm not just listening to the people in the room. But no, they feel like they're there, they can raise their hand. Say, you know, I have a question about that point you made on the 3rd slide there. So again, yeah, it's the same thing. Affording ways that they can interact.
Just reminding them they can interact.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
just
reminding them,
them,
absolutely.
yeah.
And the thing I always remind people of, the sooner you start answering questions, the more questions you're gonna get. So if you take a break, you know, 10 minutes in, say, hey, we've got a couple questions, even if you need to seed those questions. So they're plant questions, you know you're gonna ask them, they're softballs. As soon as that question gets answered, somebody's gonna perk up and be like, oh, holy crap, they're gonna answer my question.
Yep.
And use their name, just their first name, and make it personal if you can. Don't forget about things like hand raising, any yes or no, this or that type of question, quickly put up a hand. Really awesome way to keep people engaged with the software at least. And then polling questions. My caution about polling questions is make sure they serve a purpose. One of the worst things about polling is that people have got this idea that they need to launch a polling question once every 5 minutes or 10 minutes to be doing a webinar right. Absolutely not. If that polling question does not serve a purpose and the audience does not get what that purpose is, you have failed to engage them. You have probably turned them off. So think about that, and recommendation in the industry is that you keep your interaction consistent, so regularly, they happen often, and varied. So use the various tools. If you're in a meeting, you could use drawing tools and have people co-annotate on the screen. There's all kinds of stuff that you can do. We're not exactly sticking to our time, and it is lunchtime, But we're going to stick around and answer some more questions, and we're going to talk about gear. So if anybody wants to hop up and go grab some lunch and come back, totally fine. You have a question, sir?
My name's Joe from UC Davis. I agree completely. You guys are largely talking about video and audio engineering, like on-site, and how important that is, and that's the key to a great sounding and looking meeting. I'm wondering, we've done things like that largely using the webinar. Do you know of any use cases for large meetings that are real large meetings, other than kind of a known group? I mean, is anyone using the large meeting function for like a bunch of people they don't know? It seems like that could be crazy to me.
Can I start there? One thing that I'm first concerned about, if you're talking about a large meeting, keep in mind that your attendees can see each other in the participant list. And if that event is open to the public, maybe that's not a good thing. It should probably be a webinar. But if you have a large meeting, let's say, a lot of times I talk to financial groups or legal firms that are coming over from that audio-only environment, and they need that interaction. They need anybody who has a question to be able to speak up. So then they need to go with a large meeting. They don't want to promote them to a panelist. By the way, I don't know if I can say this yet, but we just released a feature in webinar. You can unmute your attendees now. You don't have to promote them to a panelist. New stuff. So I mean, yeah, large meeting, if you're coming from that audio environment where everybody needs to be able to interact and you've got upwards of 500 people, yeah, you need to be in a meeting and you need to be able to allow them to unmute themselves. But at the same time, you got to talk to them about best practices and make sure they're muting themselves. But Zoom does let you lock people into muted mode. You can prevent them from unmuting themselves in a meeting. Would you guys add anything to that? I know I talked too much.
Yeah, the protocol is so important because a lot of the faculty, our faculty, they're not used to dealing with an online audience, just the face-to-face or all online. Having that mixed environment, that's tough. So getting them in early, training, and then just consulting and just practicing.
Yeah.
We usually go into the room and we practice. We have a couple of people come on online as if they're online students, have some people in the audience. We were talking about the interaction, right? If you have a mixed audience and someone just raises their hand in the room and says, oh, I have a question about this, you have to make sure they're able to be heard by the online audience, not just by people in the room. And so again, that's where equipment is so key. Where we've always been challenged by finding the right equipment for the right room. But protocol, procedure, that instructor or that client is the boss. Set the ground rules. So everyone has a sense of expectation of what they can do or not do in that meeting.
Good advice.
Yeah.
Cool. Before anybody else totally walks away, I'm going to give you all 25% off of your consulting. If you'd like to reach out to us, if you want to work with me and our team on an event that's coming up, subject to availability. Let's make sure that you all have, my email address is going to be in there in just a moment. Oh, gosh, it's all the way at the end. Write this down, joshua.jones@zoom.us. So if you want to reach out, stop building. We're not there yet. So if you want to reach out to me, 25% off, and stick around, come up to me afterward and talk to me. And I'm going to give somebody one for free, and I don't know how I'm going to decide who gets that, but we'll figure it out. Another question? You guys okay to keep going? How do we decide? You, sir.
Okay, what if either of you ever put music or sound effects into a meeting?
Okay.
And the question I have is, you can't run that off the same computer that you're running the webinar from. So you've got to have it in a different computer, run it into a mixer that goes into that main computer. So you can't be messing with the screen as you're pushing slides or running a video or something like that.
So let me just to make sure everybody could hear, he's talking about integrating other media like audio. How do we accomplish that? Have you guys given a stab at that?
I haven't.
No,
Not yet?
Not yet.
Not yet.
I have. Now keep in mind, if you're going to share audio, you actually have to be sharing screen from that same computer. Because as you click to share screen in Zoom, you can select to share sound. Did you want to suggest something? Oh, I thought that was a... Okay. So yeah, you do have to share slides from the same computer as you're sharing the audio, unless you somehow plug in that audio through a mixing device, which is totally possible. And I've got a USB mixer over there that you could use to accomplish that. And then you could take media from any number of feeds. Does that hit where you're going for? Okay, and stick around, we'll talk some more. I think you had a question? Go ahead. A little louder for me. Oh, microphone coming? Anybody? Okay.
Two-part question. First one is, to get a different point of view in your broadcast, how often do you find it needs to have the camera operators actually do the panning, zooming?
Uh-huh.
And the second question, probably more later here, what options are there for mobile cameras, right? To get a different point of view, because sometimes we have a presenter, guest speaker to come in, who'll bring a bunch of gadgets or whatever. We'd love to be able to have some sort of mobile camera that can move around and zoom in on something so that the audience can see it a lot better who are remote.
Mm-hmm. Amber, do you want to start with that since you've got a 2-camera setup?
Yeah, so we use stationary cameras. So we generally don't pan or, and the cameras are actually auto zoom. They're really slick. They're just like this big, tiny, but they're really great quality. And so what we do is we just kind of like, almost like intersect the tripods to kind of accommodate and get the view that we want. And we'll just direct one camera at one host, and then another camera will kind of have the shot of both of them in there. And then we will just toggle within Zoom, and we'll just switch between the 2 cameras. So then that way we don't have somebody running around trying to, pan left, pan right, and our little makeshift studio is pretty small too. So we found that just setting up the stationary cameras right in the middle works well for us.
Yeah, that's
do you
what we
have
do too.
multi-cameras?
Yeah, we used to have where just a single camera, and so they have the host, they'd have a cameraman. We'd mount the C920 on a tripod, and they would pan, right? But now we can set up 2 cameras, hook them up to the same machine, and use a keyboard command to switch between the cameras. So the host can do that and just smoothly move from one to another. Speaker, questions, back to the speaker, over to a panel. And it works out pretty nicely.
That keyboard shortcut on Mac is Command-Shift-N.
Yeah.
On Windows, it's Alt-N.
Yeah.
N is in next camera. But keep in mind, if you have a built-in camera on that computer, it's going to just cycle through them 1, 2, 3. A little bit further, if you want to get more advanced, do you know what video switching software is? Like production video switching? Like what they'd use on television? I worked with, I think it was, who was it? It was Palo Alto Networks, if you've heard of them, big software company. They had an all-hands event, and they had a big old auditorium space, and they're talking to me about it, and they're like, okay, simple, you've got a couple cameras in the auditorium. Then they're like, no, hold on. We're also gonna have a camera that's in the hallway. While people are getting joined into the event, we're gonna do some games and activity and some team building stuff and have a little fun. So they had cameras in the hallway, they had multiple cameras in the auditorium space, and it's all run by a single individual in front of a video switch. And this is in the slide, but what you're going to need is to take that video switch into a computer. You can use what's called an HDMI capture card, and there are a few manufacturers that have that. Apparently Logitech just released one, so I stuck my Magewell back in the bag, but you can look at it. Magewell, Blackmagic, apparently Logitech has one that integrates with Zoom. I'm interested to hear more about that. And you plug that USB plug, adapts that HDMI output, and it just acts like any other camera and audio device in Zoom. So you can take that audio from your video switch. You can go pro. Keep in mind, Zoom is providing 720p quality video and 33 frames per second. So anything that you're providing beyond that, not coming through in Zoom, but you can still record that as a local source as well. So yeah, go nuts. As long as you can get your computer to recognize it, Zoom will be able to carry it for you. Anybody else? Sherry, what are you doing? Did you raise your hand? I think we have time for one more, and then we'll talk about some gear, and we'll hang out some more.
Okay, my name's Bill. I'm local Bay Area. My company actually produces webinars and webcasts, and we've been using Zoom and getting like 2,000 people on a call. My question, and I don't know if there is an answer, I can't figure it out. If we want to use video for let's say a 50% internal audience. I'm concerned about bringing the network down. You know, is there some magic bullet? Is there a way to architect it? I know we can do it if we do streaming, but I'm asking because we've had great success using Zoom. It's a wonderful platform. I'm happy. I just want to do video and not destroy a network.
One of my most proud moments assisting a customer, they had the same concern. They've got 500 people on a network, but keep in mind, watching a webinar and downloading that feed is not like participating fully and hosting and presenting in a webinar, sharing your screen, sharing your webcam. So your webinar attendees are maybe using like, I'd estimate like 56K per second. It's really marginal amount of bandwidth that somebody attending a webinar actually uses. Even if, because they're just viewing the webcam. Now, if they're sending the webcam, they're gonna need much more bandwidth, yeah. So working with a client, they're getting to the point where they're about to stream a video, you know, a playback of video, like a commercial or whatever that they have from their media player. And this is the part where everybody gets tense. We're on a back channel chatting, and all of a sudden I see a chat go in that says like, "Don't tell Joshua how well this is working on our network." And I just laughed. I was like, "That's great, guys. Screen capture it, share it to Zoom," and everybody laughed about it. So I've been impressed with how little bandwidth it takes to attend a webinar, but other customers that I've worked with, you know, they'll do their best to gather people into a conference room if they can, so they can kind of take some of the weight off of the network. But let's talk a little bit more about it and see if we can dig some more information out. It's lunchtime. I love that you guys are still here. Stick around. I'm gonna sit here and talk about gear. And if you guys wanna hang out, you're welcome to. If you're starving, I understand.
Hang out.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks. So I'm just gonna put up a couple wireframes, really just kind of diagramming some technical setups. If you have an individual presenter, wherever they are, and you're not using this setup, you're not getting the most out of it. You know, if they're using a built-in webcam on their laptop, if they're using that built-in mic and speaker, it's not working as well as it could. So get them on a headset. I can't stress that any more than, I can't stress that anymore. If they're on telephone, still using a headset, it's just gonna keep down the background noise. You know, we're in a room, when I'm speaking, you can hear the sound bounce around the room and potentially come back to my microphone if the microphone's too sensitive. So you got like a built-in microphone or a speakerphone, you hear all those reflections, you hear what the room sounds like, not what the person sounds like. You hear the person in the room, and it gets tiresome to listen to. It gets hard to listen to. Depending on the space, it could be noisy in the background. So yeah, no exceptions on the headset. What arguments are you gonna hear? Mainly vanity. I don't want it on my head. Well, then let me find you a better headset. Let me find you one of those little discreet in-ear ones with just a tiny little wire microphone stem, and you're gonna be in better shape. You're smiling. So yeah, no exceptions, especially, again, same concept with the external camera. You're gonna get much better quality. Laptops have tiny little camera lenses in them. They don't pick up light as well as a larger camera will. Plain and simple. And if you guys email me, I'll send you over these slides so you don't have to capture everything. So yeah, except, what else did I put in there? Yeah, phone calls also still use a headset. Desktop mics. You know, you've got Snowballs, you've got the Blue Yetis, you've got those different, did I get that right?
Yeah, Blue Yeti.
Yeah. You've got different types of desktop microphones, but be careful about their proximity to the speakers. If somebody else speaks, that echo comes right through. And also, you've got to be concerned with room noise. Those microphones, though they're set up to hear you from a fairly close proximity, they're going to pick up a lot more than a headset mic would. A headset mic is more directional than this lapel mic is. So if I snap right here with a headset microphone, it's going to be quieter than it would with this lapel mic. It's just the way it works. So yeah, no exceptions as far as I'm concerned. Add in a second monitor. If you're presenting, if you're showing your screen, and you also need to watch the chat or Q&A or the participant list, and you don't have a second monitor, it's tough. It's pretty difficult. Also, even if you can manage it, you don't need to see the whole slide. You don't care if the chat window's in front of it or the Q&A panel's there. Keep in mind, people can still see your mouse movements as you're moving over those windows, those fields, and so forth. So yeah, that's the individual setup. Now let's get a little bit more complicated. So Ken, let me know what you think about this. So still, you've got that kind of similar setup. You've got your laptop. You're going to need a USB hub, most likely. And that should be a powered USB hub, not like the one that I have on the table. It actually plugs in, not bus powered, but plugged into a wall wart. And the reason for that is they just support more devices. Some webcams will not work through a normal USB hub. Some external hard drives will not function through an external USB hub. Powered hub will solve that problem. Okay. Potential for multiple cameras. You've got the situation like Amber was talking about where they're just using 2 small Logitech C920 webcams. If they're running low on USB ports, where are they going to put in their audio device? What? It's simple. It's really easy. No, it's not simple, but once you get more of an idea of what's really going on here, it's not that complex. And we can talk about it. I've got my little mixing console. It's this tiny little 4-channel thing that it doesn't look intimidating. It's really easy to use. Now, to get into that really large space, and we're talking about that space where you have, kind of a similar setup to what we just saw in the, medium space. But then you're going to throw in things potentially like a video switch device. And perhaps you've got other media items that you need to bring in. So this really opens things up for you. You can kind of mess around with really unlimited options. So if you want to see these little wireframes, if you think they're helpful, I just want to remind you the HDMI capture card. If you find that information helpful, you can contact me. There it is. That's my email address. That's Amber's email address. That's Ken's email address. They've both been gracious enough to offer a chance for you guys to communicate. So if there's something that you want to ask them, right guys?
Absolutely.
They'd be happy to respond to you. That's my Twitter handle. I don't use it a lot, but I'm a web nerd. That's what I do. So I share out tips and tricks there. If you want to reach out to me and inspire me to use Twitter more often, you can. And yeah, feel free to stick around. Feel free to go grab some lunch and come back. Before we totally wrap up, they left me something here. 1, 2, 3. Oh, we lost one guy that asked a question. This is a green screen that you can attach to the back of your chair.
Green screen. I've seen those.
So that's kind of neat. Who else asked a question? You want to ask a question?
She had her hand up.
I've got one more. Zoom room in a webinar. A Zoom room cannot be invited to a webinar as a panelist, can it? We're having trouble with it. We'll fix it. Yeah, you cannot invite a Zoom room to a webinar as a panelist, which is a little frustrating. And I'll take the feedback and I'll send it up again and I'll say, hey, I had to answer this question in front of a bunch of people now. You can have it join in once the webinar is live, but you can't join them in practice mode, right? So that totally stinks.
I want to use it for the audio. So I end up using the phone
Uh-huh.
on the iPad to call in as the host.
So you call in to be in the prep session, and then once you go live, then you can get online?
Once they're using that room,
Uh-huh.
they want to get in the game. It happens to be a Zoom. I don't have a phone in there.
This is,
I have to use the Zoom room.
yeah. Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I don't have a solution for that yet. We don't have a solution for that yet, but I am going to kick and scream a little bit more about that.
That's what I'm doing the day after tomorrow.
And anytime I tell you I'll take the feedback, I highly encourage you to go to support.zoom.us and you hit that button that says submit a request and you say provide feedback. Reason for your comment, provide feedback. You know who's going to see that? Eric Yuan and everybody else beneath him. And when he sees stuff come through there like, hey, we need to fix this, it's all hands on deck. So yeah, he literally I can't believe he still does it, but yeah, he literally watches all the feedback come through. Absolutely. Hey.
So on the reverse of that,
Uh-huh.
I talked to you first before.
You do look a little familiar.
Yeah. So how do I remove an H232 from a webinar as a participant?
Have you noticed that you can't?
Yep, that's what I'm asking you.
I would have to test that. So you float
You
over
can't.
them.
So going with an H232 encoder from, say, a Polycom Group 500, I log into a webinar. They're automatically a host or participant.
They're always a panelist.
Yeah,
they cannot
will-
join as an attendee.
Yes. You can't remove them.
Even you float your mouse over, click the more button, and you can't remove?
Yeah, well, not that I've seen.
Okay.
That's because they always join automatically as a participant. They don't join as an attendee, which is really annoying.
Yeah, that's also another thing that we're working on. So H323, so SIP
Any SIP-based-
video conferencing units will join a webinar as a panelist. There's no way for them to join as an attendee, because think of a webinar like this. You've got your host and you've got your panelists. They're like the host and attendees in a meeting. So they're in a meeting, then you have a third level, which is the attendees, and they're essentially watching that meeting. We don't have the capability for an H323 or SIP device to join as an attendee in a webinar at this time.
Okay, that's what I thought before. But
To my knowledge, though, you can still float
remove 'em?
over and click the More menu and remove them. You could still kick them out
okay.
and remove them if that's what you're asking, but you can't
Sometimes I'm not the host. It's a
Yeah.
problem.
It's always good to be the host.
Yeah, but it's hard because if it's the remote person that's hosting, I'm assigning the webinar account to them. They're generating the thing. I join in on the back end as an assistant.
They don't make you a co-host
I guess it could, but then I'm another black box in the window.
in a webinar?
Generally, in a webinar, it comes as a black empty because I don't turn video on.
So you speak, though?
I don't want to speak at all because I'm just incognito mode. Yeah, which is annoying. So it's really
Is
hard.
there an incognito mode I don't know of?
Yeah, you need that. I wish you can take it and basically pin a video. So pin my speaker as a
Spotlight.
primary, spotlight him, and then uncheck myself off the panelist because I show up in the H232 as a participant and I can't turn myself off. Besides turning camera off, I just come as a black box.
We do that for All Access Pass, right?
Really?
So the key, are you screen sharing while you're
No,
doing it?
I'm not doing anything on screen.
There's no screen sharing. You know about the Spotlight feature?
Yeah, but Spotlight sometimes, I don't know. I get to work most of the time, but not always. Because I'll
wanna
have
talk to you
multiple-
more.
Yeah, I'll have multiple. I also run a full matrix switch too. So that makes it more difficult.
Oh, yeah, that could potentially. Would you mind taking this conversation offline so we can get in a little
Yeah.
bit further?
No
What's your
worries.
name again?
Kevin.
Kevin, and you're with?
Cengage Learning. So actually, we sell textbooks to you guys.
Awesome.
Cage.
I feel like we've talked
Oh,
before.
yeah, we've
okay.
talked.
Let's talk some more.
Sure.
You got my email address?
Yeah. I've
Cool.
connected with you on chat via Zoom. Yeah.
Oh,
You're screwed.
this guy's dangerous. Awesome, thank you. You guys want to talk about anything else? You want to come look at some gear? You want to?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't bring a ton of gear. Ken, did you bring some stuff?
Yes, I
Okay.
did.